here not representing any organisation. I'm here as an independent person, and so bringing my own sort of perspective and using information that's available in the public arena. Okay, so I'll try and give you a pretty open, honest appraisal, but it isn't an official government view. And hopefully you'll find that to be helpful. So what I'd like to cover in the time I've got is a bit about the NDIS and progress so far with the national rollout across the country. A couple of bits of the scheme that I wanted to highlight. One was the fundamental role of local area coordination as part of the national scheme, and also a very exciting development around people with long-term mental health conditions and a psychosocial disability being included in the scheme. I'll then talk a bit about huge opportunity, but also the many challenges ahead. And then I want to finish up by just reflecting on what I've tried to tease as the more universal principles that I think underpin effective national reforms. So I've been working at the edge of new ideas since the late 1980s, sort of pioneering a lot of new things, and I really appreciate the opportunity just to reflect back on that, about what's been important on that journey. So I look forward to sharing that with you. So the NDIS is the largest social policy reform in Australia since Medicare. It's not only about transforming the system, but most importantly about transforming people's lives. So the approach is based on supports being tailored to individual needs. It's an insurance approach for sustainable costs, so very importantly it's taken the whole population, it's modelled with full costs, and it's fully funded for that population. So it's a very, very different way of thinking about how you might approach this. Choice and control is central to the scheme, driven by needs in local communities and delivered locally as part of the national scheme, but it's got national coverage and there's portability right across the country. So if you've ever been in Australia, things have been very different, and this will be a wonderful thing. I just want to highlight some of the key milestones leading up to the NDIS, because it is sort of important to think about how did such a big change happen. So in 2006 we had a report called the Shutout Report, which spoke about all the very good things happening in Australia for some people with disabilities and their families, and then the other tragedies about other people who were on waiting lists and had little prospect of getting support, and about fear about what was going to happen to these people. So we had, everybody knew what the problem was, but we were a bit short on the solution. So in 2008, with the new Prime Minister, there was a summon in Parliament, and some people have been thinking about, not thinking about disability as being welfare, but thinking about it as being insurance, and that disability could affect any one of us, and that the risk of that is too big for the individual to bear. So just like we have other forms of insurance, it was, why don't we think about disability in the same vein? So this was a very, very big change in thinking. So the Productivity Commission in Australia went off to look at that idea and fully costed the current system and its impact on the gross domestic product and on workforce participation, and on people's lives, and sort of came back with this view of business as usual, what that would do versus a new way of dealing with this. Now, at the very same time, we had disability coalition between the provider organisations, the disabled people's organisations and the carer organisations that all got together, and there's an amazing campaign called Every Australian Counts. So why I mention this is, it's when the field starts to speak with unified voice, things start to happen. When people are all picking off their own agendas, government sits back and it's very easy to, or difficult to choose between different things. So this was very, very powerful. So the coalition of Australian governments agreed for the need for reform. They got the Productivity Commission to design the scheme, set up legislation, and then bilateral agreements were signed to actually trial the scheme. So we had trials in every state and territory, which were about different ways of learning about doing this. We had lots of variations and lots of different populations. And then just recently we've had sign-ups around the country to write the full scheme over the next 2 to 3 years. So from July 2016, we've now got national expansion underway. Western Australia's still got 2 models they're evaluating, and we're expecting a decision there shortly. So part of me thinks this is a huge change, it's happened really quickly, but the reality is, when it was first developed as an idea to when we'll have full scheme in 2019-20, it's actually 10 years, a decade. And so it's been a decade in development. So just a bit about in the Australian context, the role of the National Disability Insurance Agency, because it's an implementation agency, it's not a policy agency. And so the agency's job is to deliver the national scheme, build community awareness of disability, enhance the financial sustainability of the NDIS, and also develop and enhance the disability sector. So we've got legislation that sets out a board and an independent advisory council for the scheme. We've got governments that actually own the scheme. So collectively, the federal and the state and territory governments own the scheme. There's a council of ministers called the Disability Reform Council. There's an officials group that set policy. And then we have bilateral agreements between governments, the Commonwealth and each state and territory government, which sets out what will happen in each state and territory. And then there are what are called transition plans, which are about the rolling out. It's where the agency takes the agreement and has a plan to roll it out. And there's a whole set of principles about what the insurance scheme will do and what other mainstream government services need to do. And they're governed through the coalition of Australian governments. So there's a broad frame around what the scheme will do and also what housing, education, health, justice and all mainstream departments will do. Some elements are still being finalised. For example, market and workforce is still owned by governments, and also there's still work to be done about the final safeguards and quality systems going to be rolled out. But as things get agreed, they come to the agency and then they're rolled out. Just some three key ideas that underpin the scheme. The first is it's an insurance approach, which I found to be very, very different. I spent my whole life rationing services. It was always about who's the most critical need and about how to distribute those resources. We now have a scheme that's got a fully funded population where their support needs are being estimated and fully funded. We've got a scheme actuary who focuses on what has been expected, what's happening in the scheme, outcomes for people, research and innovation, and particularly around use of technology and about early intervention. So the questions become less about rationing and much more about what would be the best lifetime investment for this person. So we've all been stuck with programs, so if you just sort of throw it out the window and say, well, if you're starting again, what would you do to get the best lifetime outcomes for this person? Very, very different frame for people. Choice and control is the second pillar, and it's based on UN Convention. It's in legislation, which I think is incredibly important, so it's not just a policy, it's actually in legislation, cannot be changed without very, very significant upheaval and community support. Now, all the funds from the Commonwealth and state government programs, if you just imagine, are all being pooled. They're coming in, being pooled, cashed out, coming into the agency and going out attached to individuals' personal plans. Okay, and people have got a choice of type and mix of supports, how they're delivered, and also about how the funds are managed. Still a lot of work to be done around self-management. Everybody has that as a great objective, but the progress of the scheme so far has been quite low, and a lot more work needs to be done around that component. The third key pillar of the scheme is around community and mainstream, and as we've been hearing all day, good life for people is not just about funding and services. Love and acceptance and opportunity in the community, and people's rights as citizens to access what's available in the community and have opportunities to contribute to their communities. These are all critical things. So the scheme builds on those and supplements and complements those things, but does not take over those responsibilities of community and mainstream. So how things are changing, and this is a huge change. So previously, right around the country, can I just say some states and territories had wonderful individualised funding schemes, had done a lot of work for 30 years. Others had done hardly anything and had everything in between. So access criteria vary from state to state. These will now be nationally consistent, set out in legislation. Choice and control, which varied hugely. This now, people are basically entitled to reasonable necessary support as part of the legislation. So we've gone from this capped waitlisting sort of idea to something where people are entitled to a level of reasonable necessary support. And funding, which was in multiple programs all over the place, creating a hugely complex world, all that's been pooled and is going back into a single pool of funds being administered by the insurance agency. So these are absolutely huge changes. Some of the data so far, we've just finished the trial period of nearly 3 years. The scheme actually puts out a report each quarter, and interesting, I was listening to the Ministry of Health people before talking about financial sustainability, about, we need more evidence about financial sustainability before these changes are embedded. Well, the whole insurance scheme in Australia is based on the concept of financial sustainability. So, so the scheme act, we've got a whole team of actuaries that count and measure every single that happens, what was planned and actually what is happening. And so the scheme actually puts out a quarterly report with total data for the scheme. The 30th of June data basically showed that the agency in the scheme delivered everything that was expected during the trial period. On time, 31,000 people came into the scheme, on budget and with a high participant satisfaction level. I think on a -2 to +2 scale, it was about 1.6 was the average rating. So not perfect, but people were having generally very positive experiences. The scheme actually just released the first quarterly report for the transition period, and so we've now got 40,000 people into the scheme, $3.3 billion of support in the scheme, and 85% of people are rating their experience as being good or very good. So again, clearly transition now and the scaling up's been a bit more challenging than the trial period. We had a bit more time to be trying out different things, but we're still on track. Now scaling up, this is where it starts to get pretty interesting. This is really significant. So from June 2016, we had 31,000 people in the scheme. As of June next year, it's anticipated to be 151,000 people. The year after, it'll be a total of 345,000 people, and June 2019, a total of 460,000 people. So really over a period of 3 and a bit years, we've got a very large number of people to bring into the scheme. The size of the market at full scheme is going to be $22 billion. And that's starting from a base which was about 14 billion. So you can see there's actually quite a significant increase in support. The market will be bigger than aged care, it will be bigger than disability support pension, and bigger than the pharmaceutical benefit scheme in Australia, and only just a bit smaller than Medicare, which is the national health scheme. So in terms of scale, it's very substantial. Most states and territories are coming in over 3 years, but New South Wales coming in over 2 years. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of the quantum of that, in New South Wales there'll be an additional 64,000 people that get disability support on top of the current number. There'll be an additional $3.4 billion worth of support funding going into New South Wales, and there'll be an additional 23,000 jobs. Okay, so that's just in New South Wales. So this is of quite immense magnitude. One of the tasks that we've got now is, having gone through a trial period, is how to bring in. We've got this tension between people want to do things perfectly and how long it takes to do things perfectly, and a whole bunch of people that haven't been getting support, who are desperate to be included in the scheme to get the support that they need. And so the transition period is really focusing on trying to bring people into the scheme and get them started with their first plan, and then to develop a lifelong relationship with people where plans can be further developed as people gain experience in the scheme. So we've got this tension now between bringing people in as efficiently as possible and getting people started, but also trying to do that in the most respectful way. The way I think about the scheme is we had a 3-year trial period. We've got 3 years of transition. I reckon there's another 3 to 5 years of development, and then probably we'll have another 5 years of a mature scheme. So we've still got many, many years to go. And I think one of the things I've found really refreshing about the scheme is, as data comes in, if things are off track, then things change very quickly. So the agency's had an approach about doing things, getting data, learning, listening and changing things. And so I know it's a bit frustrating for people who want things to be perfect and to be consistent, but as we learn things, things are being changed to keep things on track. So we're in a major sort of developmental period. Now, a couple of the key bits of the scheme that I'm very, very passionate about. One is local area coordination, and the second is around people with a psychosocial disability who have been a bit of a lost population in the Australian context. Many of you will know about local area coordination in the New Zealand context. something I've been involved with in Western Australia since the late 1980s, and so we've been working at this for many, many years. It is something that was developed in Western Australia, spread to other parts of Australia, now in New Zealand, but importantly throughout Scotland, many projects now in England and Wales, and also national demonstration projects in Ireland as well. So it is something that's got a very long-term track record about getting alongside people in local communities, providing personalised and localised support, helping people build up their vision and possibilities for a good life, using direct funding to support that, but also, very importantly, working at a local community level. So as issues are identified, rather than just thinking that money is going to be a solution, often working with personal networks and community and mainstream organisations to build a more welcoming and inclusive community. So local area coordination is something that's got a big track record, and it's interesting, when the Productivity Commission designed the scheme, they stripped everything back. The key staffing and the operating model for the scheme was local area coordinators and independent planners. Okay? And then people have their supports through their plans, and now they can also have support coordination as part of their funded plans. But basically, when it's all stripped back, there's no case managers inside. This is all now local area coordination and also independent planners. Every person will have access to a local area coordinator or an independent planner. And the modelling is that we want a whole bunch of people to do self-planning, where people are enabled to do things entirely for themselves. Between 60 and 70% of the full population have access to a local area coordinator, and then the remaining population have access to specialised planners. Local area coordinators will also work with people that will come into the scheme as participants, but also work at a local community level. So we've got a bunch of people who also have a more mild, moderate disability who won't come into the scheme, and so there's a bunch of mainstream programs and also a layer called information linkages and capacity building, which provides bulk-funded, broad-based supports which are about information and capacity building and linkage to the community, and a very strong drive around peer support being a major part of that, that layer of support. Okay. Now, local area coordination was also, first of all, envisaged to be delivered by the agency directly, but now it's going to be delivered through community partners. So now we've got the additional challenge about rolling this out across the country. Now, we've had local area coordination in some states and territories, not others, so we're building on strengths that exist in each location, and it will probably take us 3 to 5 years to have a fully functioning national local area coordination system. So now I want to talk a bit about psychosocial disability, and it's interesting, when I sort of had worked in disability for many years, and then I took on a job as Western Australia's first mental health commissioner. And very, very interesting, it's almost like the two separate worlds, that despite many people with disabilities having mental health problems, and many people having long-term mental health conditions, having disability, the two worlds actually didn't often connect or talk very well together. So when the Productivity Commission did their planning for the NDIS, they left psychosocial disability out. And there was a huge community uproar from the sector about being included. So it's pretty amazing. It's also interesting that the UN Convention includes psychosocial disability as part of the coverage of the UN Convention. So there's a bit of a debate around the world about, well, is disability and recovery opposites, and a bit of a divide around the world about whether people see themselves as having disability or not. And a whole bunch of people see a disability frame to be much more empowering than an illness medical frame, health frame. But some people don't like the word disability, so see it to be a bit. So this is a bit of a tension that we're sort of seeing played out across the country. But it's included in the UN Convention and included in our national scheme. The estimate was that 14% of people in the scheme would have a psychosocial disability. I got very excited, 57,000 people. And for me, these were many people who have been in the mental health system for many, many years. They're not going to be cured by the treatment, despite everybody's best efforts, and really require practical support to get on and have a decent life. So, and just to give you a little bit of sense of that, when I was working in the public mental health system, the population we're talking about was about 1 in 8 people who use the public mental health service. So it's only a small, tight group of a much broader population who have got a long-term disability related to a significant mental health condition. And often these are people with schizophrenia or bipolar or depression or other similar mental health conditions. Now, I was very interested that, so Mark, you were talking with Mark's here somewhere this morning about, so I've had colleagues in the US doing self-directed support in mental health for 15 years through a variety of projects, first of all in Florida, then Texas, and now a range of different sites across the US as part of national demonstration. We've had people doing personal budgets in mental health and health in the UK. When I came to mental health in the Australian context, there wasn't one word in any policy document in the country about people having choice and control over their support. There was plenty about recovery, but it was still this sort of professional paradigm where the service system will sort of work in a person-centred way, but never went as far as giving people choice and control over what's important to them and what their support should look like. So, so I got very, very excited, and through the work I did with the Mental Health Commission, we set up a personal budgets program with 120 people out of farmstay hospitals into their own homes within 3 years, and it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty damn successful. There was one woman that particularly stuck in my mind who'd spent 10 years in hospital. Every time they looked at setting up sort of group housing in the community, she didn't fit into any of those. Now, that were the rules. You didn't fit, you didn't get to go anywhere. Through our approach, through personalised planning, we got her family and friends and supporters into hospital. We gave her a choice of providers, a personal budget, a choice of housing. She got her own house in the community, had some living support, started to reconnect with her family, friends, got her pet, she's part of the neighbourhood. Her support's really phased down a fair bit. She had living support, but didn't need that after a while. She's now living a really good life. And I remembered in hospital, she would sit in a chair near the front door every day because she wanted to get out, and secondly, because people were fighting and she didn't want to be hurt. And then I saw the labels that we used to describe her, and then I saw what her life looked like now, full of her strengths and capacities and what she was doing, and having a full and really good life in the community. So, so when the challenge came with the insurance scheme, I sort of jumped at this thinking, what an amazing opportunity for this group of people to have a real crack at a good life in the community. So we have a lot of challenges around language, the language of the scheme, around likely and permanent disability people didn't like, scheme processes, and I'd worked in disability for nearly 30 years talking to people about this way of thinking about personalised support and individual budgets. In mental health, there'd been no discussion at all. So we sort of started in a bit of a different place, but when I went to work with the agency, what we basically did is I got a whole bunch of people in, we did a lot of co-design. We started at the beginning around access, support design, outcomes, those sorts of things, did a number of reviews, and really built up the capability of the agency to a point now where we're just rolling out recovery training for all of our staff, which I think is an amazing thing which will benefit everybody. And just some of the data, as of June last year, we made a pretty solid start. We've got nearly 3,000 people in the scheme with a primary psychosocial disability. That's pretty good in a couple of years. That's a lot of people. And we've got another whole bunch of people that have got other disabilities that have also got mental health conditions. So we've actually got quite a large population. We've got $147 million committed to that group of people. And interestingly, we started off with our projections about nearly 14% of people coming into the scheme. In our best trial site, we've got about 14%. So we're actually on what we had projected to be the uptake in the scheme. So we feel as though we're sort of reasonably on track. Lots of examples about getting people out of hospital, people that were stuck in, if you know anything about the mental health system, in Australia, nearly 30-something% of people are stuck in hospital, not because they need to be there, but there's nowhere to go. They can't go home, or haven't got a home to go to. And we're building more hospital beds, which is pretty crazy, really. So getting people out of hospital, we've got people that were stuck in transition units, we get out of hospital, but then you're stuck in a halfway sort of place. And also, I'm really excited about people that have been stuck in private hostels, which vary in quality. Often these are for-profit boarding houses. And so now we've got a major project around getting people out of those and getting people connected to the community and building their lives. So I've just done a whole range of presentations around the country around mental health and meeting with people all over the place. And people are always on about all the TV issues about the scheme, what's going wrong, people with mental health problems and all that. But when I ask the question about, what's happening for people that come into the scheme, the consistent feedback is that people that are coming in, once they're in, it's really good. They're getting increased opportunities and things are working well. So not perfect, and people are concerned about people that may be in programs that won't come in, and what they'll be left with outside the scheme, but the experience of people has been overwhelmingly positive. Can I just say to you, in terms of providers, probably got a couple of different stories here. We've got some providers which, despite knowing this is coming, haven't really thought about it much and haven't adapted. And we had one provider that said, the world's going to fall, and we're going to pull out, and this is going to be... They actually said, people are going to die. This is so bad. That agency went into liquidation. They were taken over by another organisation. Those people have now got a choice of a whole range of providers. All the staff are picked up by other organisations, and people now have actually got a better range of things to deal with. So we had, some that haven't adapted and didn't survive. We've got some others that are doing amazingly well. And for example, there's a provider in the Hunter who said their core mission was around people with psychosocial disability was to use peer support as a very powerful avenue of support. This one agency went from 5 to 35 peer support workers in their program. Okay, so this is an avenue that people actually switch on to the opportunity for people to do things that are really consistent with the message. And there's a much bigger story here about the large number of people with disabilities that are coming to work in the scheme, and also the people with disabilities that can have employment through providing support as part of the scheme. So this is a very big opportunity. Now, I've just got I'm not giving you the official government line here, and what I've done is New South Wales Mental Health Commission, who I respect very deeply, they produced a video about a couple of people from they know who had come into the scheme, and produced a very nice video about just to make sure I get some sound. So it's just about 5 minutes. So I hope you enjoy this.
I had a very severe depression and I was psychotic, but ever since then, maybe every 18 months to 2 years, even less sometimes, I've landed in hospital. My wish would be that I could still be a doctor, but I got to a point where I thought I was dangerous. So that's a big loss for me. 3 years ago, I had an admission where I was, again, had a psychotic depressive illness, and when I got out of hospital, I was a bit disorganised and having trouble with my memory, and what happened was that I lost the house that I was living in. Like, I was renting, and I got kicked out, and I had nowhere to go. I can't tell you how unsettling that was. It's one of the worst experiences I've ever had. It's hard to do it on your own, I've had it very difficult.
Well, Daniel was diagnosed with a genetic disorder when he was 5 years old, and he suffered medical, problems all of his life. But just after his 23rd birthday, he had his first psychotic episode, and he's been diagnosed with treatment-resistant schizophrenia. Daniel has lost all of his skills with his personal care, his life-living skills, and his driving confidence. Well, it was very difficult for me. I'm a single mum, and Daniel was in hospital for 10 months. I was working full-time, and I actually cut back to part-time 4 months into his hospital stay, because it was just couldn't cope, just so exhausted, because you're just so mentally drained.
It's interesting because I had a very severe illness at the end of last year. Because I became very depressed, my affairs were in a terrible state. So things like electricity hadn't been paid, this whole room was full of papers. You're always fragile when you come out of hospital, but this time they did this kind of intensive support funded by the NDIS, which has made a huge difference in terms of my steadying myself, and getting things done. I've done things like a budget, because my budget was a little bit unrealistic before. We've done a resume. I do my weekly shop with them. just having the support of someone makes a huge, huge difference.
But now that we have, help through the NDIS, it's just taken a tremendous amount of pressure off me. A support worker comes in 3 days a week, and we also have given Daniel some chores to do around the house, and just simple things like emptying the dishwasher, emptying the recycling, making his bed, wiping his toilet over, and just helping him with cooking skills. And then he also has a young guy that comes in and takes him out for social interaction. So they go temping bowling, to the movies. So, he's getting out in the community and having contact with other people other than just myself. I believe that if we didn't have the funding from the NDIS, that Daniel will probably be still sitting on the lounge watching Jurassic Park.
I think I'm much weller because of it. I have to tell you that I have never, ever felt so steady and so supported as I have in this last year. Without the support, I ended up homeless. That's the basic bottom line.
I'm actually, for the first time, feel a little bit of hope, especially having the occupational therapists come in and do some work with Daniel. I really kind of feel we're starting to making some leaps and bounds now, and it's really quite exciting.
The NDIS has the possibility that people can actually get the individualised support they need to do the things they want to do. Just because someone sits there like this, don't you believe that they don't have a dream for their life? They do. I would love a relationship. I would love to, what I'd love to do? I'd like to do a PhD on peer work. That's what I would really love to do. We'd just take little baby steps and, getting a resume together, applying, just little bits at a time.
I hope you enjoyed that. They need, and then a bit of a slippery slope. And if you're a family and you've got a family member who's been unwell and doesn't really want to engage with the world and stuck at home, is most often services won't come to your home. They expect people to get out and engage, and so these two examples filled me with a lot of optimism, and I really did really pay attention to the words about hope and optimism and about creating small steps to a better life. So I think they also spoke to a lot of the ideas that Michael was talking about. Okay, so just on a personal level, I want to give you a bit of my view of the NDIS, key opportunities and challenge. So this is sort of my view, and also, look, there's a huge amount of media. If you want to follow the media, there's 10 stories every day in the Australian context. I think Simon today spoke about shifting power. This is a big power shift, equalising, so people have got the budgets, they're choosing providers have had funding going to them in the past. That's a big change. And federal and state and territory governments, there's a change there in sort of decision-making and control and shared responsibility. So this is sort of playing out these changes not unexpectedly. Look, some of the key opportunities and challenges. Enormous opportunity to build on the base of successful trials. I feel the agency has got a very strong commitment that if things aren't working, they change things. And because the data is collected all the time and it's instantaneous, if you're off track, then action is taken straight away to bring things back on track. So enormous opportunity, and I'm particularly thinking about the large number of people that are not getting support currently that will be entitled to reasonable necessary support. Secondly, this insurance approach and a complete national data set. One of the interesting things is this whole thing has sort of exposed the issue that a lot of governments don't really know how many people there are and what they're actually getting. They fund programs, and their programs have got data, and nobody could tell me how many people with a mental health condition were getting community-based mental health support, because everything's done by programs. And when we start getting program lists, you find some people don't exist, or they've moved, or So there's a lot to be said here. We're going to have a complete national database. We'll know who all the people are, what they're getting, and most importantly, there's baseline establishment of personal outcomes for people, and every decision about their supports and about their progress will be tracked longitudinally. And so if people are getting support and things aren't working, then things will need to change. Okay, so it's very much focused on not the inputs and what's sort of going in, but is it making an impact on people's lives? Look, there are issues about flexibility, and I think part of what's happening is, in order to contain, to ensure, to demonstrate to governments that the scheme is sustainable in an unknown market, there's had to be some price capping and some definition of support items in catalogues, but you just need to know the long-term aim is to move away from that and to give people much more freedom to use their supports and their funding across the different outcome areas. But this is a bit of a developmental sort of process. But the focus of the whole scheme is around social and economic participation. So, as well as each individual moving towards what they want for their own life, we've got this complete data set about what is happening to the population of people with disabilities versus other populations around health, employment, housing, and a whole range of other things. And data doesn't normally excite me, but I'm getting pretty excited by this because I think for the first time ever we'll really get a handle on what's happening. But then we've got a lot of major challenges. If you can just imagine, you've got a fixed date. So there's agreements which say the scheme will start on a certain date, and in order for that to happen, the agency says we need these agreements to be made, and we need this data about who's coming in order for this to happen. Okay? So some of these things don't happen in time, but the date doesn't change. Okay? So if you read the commentary about what's sort of happening is, well, if you haven't got the data, you can't, do as expected. So there've been some issues to do with the agency and its IT system, having a bit of a meltdown. 1st of July, new system, the portal didn't behave. So really what I'm saying here is nobody's single problem, but collectively we need collective leadership to underpin this major national reform. So things will be back on track by the end of the year, we'll be back on target, and that's what all governments have required. So sector development at all levels, this is huge. This is huge for providers to get their heads around, people with disabilities and their families to imagine what life might be like. If different questions are asked about their outcomes and a good life for people and about the best lifetime investment. Because this now is the new frame. It's not what rationing resources now, it's about what could we do now to build capacity, which will build social and economic participation in the long term. And then that will be measured. So there's a lot of work, and I think my experience with this type of methodology is you just start where you are and you get alongside people and you start to work it out, and people's ideas about possibilities will grow, provided, as Michael says, you've got an intentional program around helping people imagine better through being exposed to information and other people who have done things differently, and people try things out, and that's what will happen for many years to come. We've got a big issue around market and workforce, so clearly we're moving from somewhere between 80 to 100,000 staff in the sector to 160,000 full scheme. So this is a great employment opportunity. So right around the country, people are seeing this to be a major opportunity for local communities, and an enormous opportunity for people with disabilities to get employment and have lead roles in this scheme. Easy to fall in the trap. This is all about people getting their personal plan and their budget, and that's going to solve the problems of the world. And I think, as Simon was talking about this morning as well, and also Michael, a lot of people's most fundamental needs are for relationships to be included and to have the same opportunities as other people, and money can't buy those things. So there's a lot of work to be done at a community level, and also with mainstream agencies. So we've got the National Disability Strategy, which again requires whole of government, whole of the business community to be doing their bit, and the scheme is meant to be supplementing that whole of government and whole of business effort. But the danger here is that we get so focused on the individual plans and lose sight of the collective citizenship issues and the broad community issues. And look, the other thing I want to mention is about this tension between what I call building and holding the vision through transition. So I'll give you an example. I've got a vision for how local area coordination can operate. We did all the research about best design, what it could look like, The reality is when you've got to bring a whole bunch of people into the scheme quickly, you might need to do some things to bring people in and get them started, and then to resume more of the ideal relationship where you take more time to develop things into the future. The challenge here is that if people get lost in what you need to do in the short term and don't keep their eye on what the scheme needs to be long term. Okay, and really what's in individual plans is incredibly important, but also work at the community level is unbelievably important. Okay, otherwise we'll have people who are well funded but don't have the opportunities and the support in the community. Okay, so what I've done just towards the end, I just want to pull out, having been involved with a few of these sort of new initiatives, either at a state level or a national level, and have really spent probably the last 10 or 20 years of my life travelling around the world, finding the very best examples, things I could find, and trying to understand how they worked, how they were set up, and how they were sustained. So I've just tried to pull out some what I call some more universal principles, and it's interesting that wherever you go around the world, I've been to Poland, I've been to Canada, I've been all over the place, and it's the same old stuff. And I just thought it was proved in Western Australia, like that we have these problems, but it's very, very powerful what's happening around the world, and when you look at how people have crafted better solutions to support people, I've been searching for the things that underpin some of that. So, and I've sort of broken these up into what I call things at a broad systems level, and then also things at a more individual level. At a systems level, big progress is made when you get collective leadership across disability, not each individual disability group doing their own bidding. Then that becomes a recipe for not much happening because governments can't decide. And there are too many different versions about what's important, so governments don't do much at all. It's when the whole of the sector speaks with the same voice about what's needed that becomes an irresistible thing. Strong governance and things that I've seen that have worked and been sustained over a period of time have had people with disabilities and their families as part of governance at a board level, or there's been this immense commitment to co-design. I think Simon this morning talked about co-production, but it's really this getting alongside people and figuring out stuff together. Where that's really authentic, some of these really positive things have been able to be built and also sustained. Moving from a welfare rationing approach to a whole of population insurance approach. I'll just give you an example. When we were building Lake Area Coordination in Western Australia, we were building it through country Western Australia, and then we did some metropolitan pilot sites, and we had this pivotal 2-day planning session, about the future of how things were going to be. And everybody could sort of understand the country bit because it was smaller and remote and that. But when it came to the metropolitan area, we basically said, to have complete coverage, we'd need, 200 local area coordinators. That's unrealistic. Okay? We should just do targeted case management and brokerage. Okay? So at the end of the first day, a colleague of mine, Greg Lewis, who's one of the also a key founding people of local area coordination, we sort of took stock a little bit and had this little debate that night about what's realistic, what's a bit crazy, but also what do we know works. And what we knew was this worked when you work with a certain number of people in a local community at a level of quality. We just said, bugger off, we're not going to buy this other game of rationing, we're going to say to do this, you need to build it one community at a time. And I look back on that, a slightly crazy decision, but that was the beginning of the major transformation. Because then what we did is we started to build it at a level of quality. People in other areas saw that they wanted that. And then we got to a point where there was enough momentum to flip the whole system over and have local area coordination and this system of more personalised support right throughout the state. Okay, so what I'm saying here is there's a moment of you've got to think big about the whole population, but if you keep on playing the game is we're just going to ration the resources that we've got, we actually never deal with the whole problem. So dealing with the whole problem, I think, is critical. Self-direction being built into legislation, both in the Disability Services Commission in Western Australia, we put in the first Disability Services Act that funds could be directed to individuals and their families. Okay? It wasn't just a policy, because policies come and go. And the NDIS enshrines this in legislation. So this, I think, is a very important safeguard. Maintaining momentum and doing enough of the right things fast enough. Just to give you an idea, when I was working in the mental health system, they were planning hospitals 5 years out. Okay? And it was all about building more beds for people because people were turning up at EDs. And I had this sense of, well, I could build a perfect system of supported living for people, 5 people at a time over the next 10 years, but they built another 500 hospital beds. So I did a very aggressive, we did 120 people in 3 years, and it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good, and created this enormous foundation, which then stopped the building of additional beds. So I think what I'm trying to say is, it's not enough just to be doing the right thing. I think we need to be doing enough of it and fast enough, otherwise other agendas are taking over. And the last point is about integrity of design and implementation. You know, people will hear people speak, they'll hear about an idea, they want the outcomes it's achieved, but they don't want to do the hard work in terms of the integrity of the design and implementation. Life's full of people who will take a label, they'll take lottery coordination, self-directed support, and they'll do half of it and then wonder why it's not perfect. Okay, and I think what we've learned here is things that have got a long-term evidence base and fidelity, the fidelity of implementation and measurement in data. We've lottery coordination in my state had more than 25 published external evaluations. Okay, every couple of years, another evaluation, so very strong evidence base. So I think having big goals, sometimes you need really big goals. If you don't have really big goals, I think we're selling people short. So I think this is probably a particular challenge in the New Zealand context about, you know, how big, how fast. I guess from my point of view, when the door opens, you jump in and do as much as you can. So at an individual level, and these are some of the things that I've really tried to distill, that we do better at supporting people to get a good life when we get to know each person well over time, and we do this person by person. I've seen people with huge amounts of money, but it's not working for people. And so taking more time at the beginning actually gives you a better outcome. So doing things slowly and well. Connections to the local communities, so we need staff that are based locally and understand how community works and how personal relationships work. Otherwise, they've got no idea about what they're trying to support people with. So we need people with technical professional skills, but people that understand community, critically important. Positive values and assumptions about individuals and families and communities with safeguards as needed. I used to laugh that you could read policy documents. People either start at one end, they start at the end of, people have got all these disabilities, can't do things, and will give you choice and control of various elements of your life. As you demonstrate, you can do that. So you start at that end, or you start at the other end, which is you assume people can do great things, ordinary people, people with disabilities, their families and communities, and you're building the safeguards around each individual person. So the rhetoric sounds the same, but it's a fundamentally different outlook. So, and Michael spoke earlier about positive presumptions. And it really, I just wrote it down and Michael said to me, well, you know, you look around, we're selling people short. You know, people with disabilities will underestimate what they can do. So I think flipping it right over and having positive assumptions and then building in safeguards is a very important thing to do. Next thing is about what I call building capacity versus providing services. And so a lot of us got caught in this world of providing services to people, which actually makes a lot of people dependent. And so, you know, it's about fixing their disability or their problem. Whereas a mindset which is about building something which is stronger and building capacity and self-sufficiency is a whole different mindset. So roles which are about capacity building and facilitation as opposed to providing. And just the last couple about asking the right question. And very early on in my life, the questions are all about the mix of services and what people wanted. And I think phrasing the conversation about a good life and what it means and what's most fundamentally important to people raises all those issues about value relationship and choice and control and making a contribution and having challenging, interesting things to do in people's lives. That sort of helps people understand there's certain things that money can't buy. So we need to work in a different way to build and support and value natural relationships and opportunities in the community. And often money gets in the way of those things. Okay, and probably the last thing is about what I call the right relationship. And more, what I've seen things that have really worked well for people is when the system finds a way of getting alongside people and as equals and bringing expertise and valuing people's own expertise and expertise of their family, friends and networks, and figuring out things together, as opposed to anybody's got all the answers or the perfect solutions. So this right relationship, again, if you've heard Michael speak over the years about the right relationship with people, this image of being alongside people in their, alongside them in the community, helping them figure out their goals and dreams for a good life and the steps they can take to build that is the best place to be. So look, just on a closing note, I did want to say I've become increasingly preoccupied with how important leadership is around sustainable change and also about networking and connection, particularly around, as Michael said, people in other places have done amazing things. And so if you sit in your own home patch and don't connect with people, you'll never learn about those sorts of things. So there's an opportunity coming up early next year. I'm involved with Michael and various others here, the International Initiative for Disability Leadership. We've got Sydney Leadership Exchange next year, February, March. We've got 25 leadership exchanges, 5 in New Zealand, 20 in Australia. And then we've got a 2-day network meeting, fabulous program. So if people are interested, please come and see me because it's free of charge apart from your travel. You can go and spend 2 days being immersed in some wonderful programs across the country. But most importantly, you build up your network of people who share passions and similar interests, and it's something that we can grow and develop in coming years. So on that note, I've got a bit more time tomorrow. I'm doing a workshop, so if people want to drill me a bit further about things, happy to do that. But Thank you.